Hey folks, welcome to episode 73 of Miyagi Mornings, and I'm hoping, I've always tried to do Miyagi Mornings as a non-political thing, and I'm hoping no one takes this one politically, but I'm sure some will, and, well, some people can't be helped. I want to ask you guys a question today. You guys usually ask me questions. I have a question for you, then I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, but I'm going to ask this question. I want you to sit and I want you to really think about it. I'm almost 50 years old, so if you're in my range, 5, 10 years, either side of it, I want you to ask this question of yourself. What would your grandparents think of us today and how we've responded to this COVID crisis? With so much fear and so much willing compliance to just things that are completely out of thin air, where they come up with these ideas like, well, you have to stay 6 feet apart. Before you start defending that decision, let me tell you where that 6 foot number comes from. It comes from a scientist who came up with that number. Yeah, he was a scientist. He's been dead over 100 years. It's just this arbitrary number that they picked. This masking, the masking's going to save millions and millions of lives, but we're still going to have millions and millions of people die in the United States. We're supposed to have 2 million people die. I mean, 500,000, and over half of them were at least 8 years old in the median life expectancy in the United States. And we just willingly comply. We mask our children. We make them stay away from their friends. We stay away from our family. I know a lot of you don't. I didn't. I've never complied with any of this shit. I'm just saying, how would your grandparents view us in our willingness to lay down like dogs in front of the people that are supposedly in authority? Now, I want you to do something for me if you're a little bit younger. I want you to just try to think about your grandparents, but then think about what it took to raise them, and so in your realm of age, you would be your great grandparents. How would they feel about the way that people are behaving right now? I find the entire thing really disturbing, and this isn't about politics. It's about obedience to the point that human beings, to me, seem to be, the best word I could describe the average person today is domesticated. We've become domesticated like a cow. To me, human beings are supposed to be feral. And what spawned today's episode was a comment on MeWe. And it was in the post for this, but it wasn't really done in the form of a question. It was more of a response to some things I said on the podcast. And the person said, in your thoughts about kids and seemingly enjoying wearing masks and things like that, I'll get to that in a second. Do you think maybe they're actually more resilient than we give them credit for? And they're tougher than we think, and they have some sort of evolutionary adaptive thing going on that they just go along with everything. And no, I don't. This is what disturbs me. I see families out to eat, and I see mom, dad, etc., eating, so they take their freaking mask off. And I see children, especially boys in their early teens, like 12 to 14, with their mask on their chin while they're eating and smiling and being happy about it, and they finish eating, they put their mask back on. I'll tell you exactly what I think's done that to kids. Your freaking school system, guys. That's how they eat in their lunchroom, 6 feet away from their friends. They've been conditioned. They're easier to condition because they're in the conditioning system every freaking day. And there's never been a time in history where the conditioning of our children has been higher than right now. For the love of God, if you can, in any way, shape, or form, get your kids out of these freaking state-run institutions that you've been told are public schools. They're not public schools. They're government schools. They're not public about them. You think they're public, then just see if you can go down there and walk in the door. You can't. They have controlled access. They're a state-run institution. They're government education centers. That's what they are. Government programming centers. Government indoctrination centers. And they're destroying our children. And I know some of you are like, why can't you just let the kid, if the kid's happy with it, why don't you let him be happy? Because he shouldn't be. Because he shouldn't be. If I saw a kid playing with dog shit and he was just happy with it, I'd stop him because it's dangerous. Right? You can get diseases and illnesses, actual, real ones. Our children are the least at risk of any member of our society from this freaking virus, which is just basically a bad cold for 99% of people, and that is by the numbers fact. And we have let them destroy our lives and the lives of our children and train our children into compliance. Look at here. You see this? This is what makes you an individual. This is what makes people look at you and go, oh, that's Jack, that's John, that's Bill, that's Tommy, that's Sandy, that's Susie. This is who we are. This is who we are. This is our personal identity. It's been stripped from us. It's been stripped from us. And I have deep fear for the next generation of young men. Deep fear. Because this started way before this shit. Kids that are in their 20s now, I remember just meeting people's children, especially their young males, 10 to 14, and felt like I was talking to a girl. And I don't mean that, the whole transgender bullshit. I don't mean any of that. I mean, the kid's a normal boy. But they just sound weak and soft and gentle. Like they're half the age that you would expect them to be. They're not rough and tumble freaking boys. This is dangerous because I'll tell you what it results in. You either end up with men that are complete freaking pussies, or you end up with men that are extremely violent. And yes, it is all connected to each other. When you emasculate young males, which is clearly what's happened, and continues to happen, and continues to be advanced, when you emasculate young males, as they grow and develop, a certain portion of them rebel against it, and without the right male guidance in their life, they become inherently, dangerously, and uncontrollably violent. Tell me we haven't seen that. Or they become total pussies. And then you end up with an entire generation of men that are violent thugs and complete pussies who can't defend their family. And I know some of you are thinking, he's gone too far now. No, I haven't. Probably not gone far enough. When you listen to these kids, and I don't mean to insult anybody, but you listen to these kids that are like 12 years old. And you know what they make me think of? They make me think of like an early 80s interview with Michael Jackson. Just a gentle little... What the hell? And I don't care if it's one here and one there, and that's just their personality. That's not what I'm talking about. The person actually has that personality, God bless them. They'll probably have some wonderful gift that comes from it. But when the majority of young males sound like that, act like that, comply with everything they're asked to comply with, we have a problem. We have a very serious problem. And I'm going to tell you the story that I've told on the podcast a few times, the story of the elephants. And it should scare the shit out of you when you fully understand this. So, long ago we decided there were too many elephants based on how much of their habitat we destroyed in Africa, and the solution became culling elephants, just basically going out and shooting elephants and killing them by the thousands and tens of thousands, not for the ivory trade now, for their own good. And what happened is initially they killed off like old males and even old females that were beyond reproduction age, and then they would have to come down to some younger ones as well. But hey, it was just kind of like, hey, these ones had a good long life, it's time for them to go and make room for others. That's the sick, twisted mindset that they had. Instead of like fix the habitat and like let animals live in the habitat they're supposed to, no, we'll just start killing them. But here's what happened. When they killed off all the old males, which had already been heavily killed off due to ivory hunters to begin with, they started to lose a natural occurrence known as bachelor herds. So the males will actually get together, and they call them bachelor herds. I mean, it doesn't mean that they haven't bred or anything, but they kind of just, all the males get together, and for a time every season they leave. They go off to do male things. I know that's crazy in this world, but animals don't read your gender books, okay? And they don't get offended by Dr. Seuss either. So they would go off. And it was basically like, when I was a kid, your great uncles took you hunting and fishing. Kind of like that. Elephant camp for the young men. Once that elephant grew to the point where he was no longer really a calf, but he was kind of a teenager. Because elephants live long enough. The teenager elephants are about like teenager kids. The males started taking them with them. And like young men, they would get violent, they would do some stupid shit, and the older males would beat the crap out of them. Not like into the ground or anything, but like, when you got somebody that's 25% bigger than you and the power of an elephant, thump your ass with a trunk, or give you a poke with a tusk, you're like, oh, okay. Well. So this went on, and this had gone on for as long as there's been elephants, longer than there were humans. And in the range, the African elephants did very little damage to like villages and stuff like that. They didn't cause much trouble. There were some problems in there. Actually, a big animal, they get violent at times. But overall, there was pretty much peace between humans and elephants. If anything, we were the violent ones killing them, and they still were fairly peaceful critters. So, like, if a young male started, like, going into, like, a village or something to tear shit up, the older males were like, dude, no. We don't do that. They understood the balance. You're talking about an animal that could be 75 years old or older. They have, when any critter that's been around that long and the intelligence level of an elephant, elephants have fucking graveyards, people. Anything that buries its dead and lives that long and goes back and visits its dead and has remorse for its dead is a wise animal. So they had this wisdom. And these older males had this toughness about them, and they put the youngsters in line so that by the time the old patriarchs died, the next generation of the older patriarchs were ready to take over. And this worked for generations beyond humanity. Something happened, no? When they went on this culling spree and they killed off all the old men. The young males banded together in gangs in their bachelor herds. And they started like going into villages and smashing shit or grabbing human beings and smashing them into the ground with their trunks. I've even seen video footage of a guy that got smashed and the elephant went down on its knees and used its head to basically rub him into the dirt like you might, rub a cockroach into the woodwork. And eventually we stopped doing this, and we started protecting them again and restoring some of their habitat. And as the young violent males aged out, the ones that made it, the bachelor herds began to return to their normal purpose, and a lot more pieces come to the worlds where elephants and humans coexist once again. What's that make you think of? If it doesn't make you think of all this shit where we make out, and I'm not putting anybody down here, but we have made single motherhood into a heroic act. When you make something into a heroic act, you get more of it. And we have so many young men growing up without a tough-ass guy in their life guiding their footsteps through that period in time. And on top of it, even where we don't have broken families, we have now generations of men that have been raised to be pussies that have no idea how to do this anymore. That's the world we live in today. And it's designed to be the world that we live in today. And I'm big on solutions. So all I'm going to tell you is you don't have to participate in this shit, and don't let your kids participate in this shit. I'm not talking about turning men into little thugs. I'm talking about preventing them from becoming thugs on the other side of this stuff. Because unless you fill them up with puberty blockers or some shit because there's something wrong in your head, they're going to go through that process. They're going to mature. And if they don't have the guidance and they haven't had the outlet for being innately male, you're going to get pussy or thug on the other side of it 90% of the time. 90% of the time. I have honest to God, folks, I have been shocked in meeting people's 10, 12-year-old males and just going, what the hell? What the hell? I'm not talking about how they dress or wearing their hair long. I don't give a shit about stuff like that. When I was a kid in the 80s. We wore our hair down past our shoulders as long as we could until somebody made us cut it, right? I don't mean that. I'm not talking about the clothes they wear. I'm talking about the way they talk. I'm talking about the way they behave. I'm talking about this inward reclusiveness. And I'm not talking about introverts being introverts. Again, if that's your personality, that's one thing. When the vast majority of these young men just don't act flippin' normal, and I'm sorry, but normal in this context is a thing. And now you're ramping it up with this, basically, I think that the post-COVID America, we're basically through this, guys. We got to stop pretending that this is March last year and we don't know yet. We know who's at risk. We know who's not. We've had probably 100 million, about a third of the people in this country have had this disease and can't get it anymore or spread it. There's a shitload of people who have innate immunity to it in the first place. We need to stop pretending this is all not true. But no. It's been used to create what I would call a national obedience contest. The most virtuous among us are the ones that are most compliant and most obedient. It's time to stop. It's not political. It's about the human condition. It is not natural. It is not normal for young people to stay away from each other, to cover their face, and to be completely compliant and obedient. I'm sorry, it isn't. And it's up to you guys that have kids out there. I hear all these things about why people can't homeschool their kids. If your kid was in a building that was on fire and no one else was going to save them, if you had to, you'd throw a wet blanket over you and risk your life and possibly come out with third-degree burns, but you'd get your damn kid out of that building. If you think that the current public education system is any less dangerous to the long-term well-being of your child, you're just not paying attention. I'll be back tomorrow with another one.